The galaxy was vast, filled with countless stars and strange worlds. At the center of this expanse sat the Great Galactic Council, a gathering of species that had once believed in peace, law, and mutual respect. The council chambers were enormous, decorated with banners and symbols from dozens of civilizations. Long ago, every voice had carried equal weight. But over the years, something darker had crept in. One empire had grown stronger than the rest, an empire that fed on fear, the Veyran Dominion. The Veyran were tall, broad, and cruel, with voices that cut through silence like sharp blades. Their soldiers patrolled the council's halls. Their warships circled important systems, and their leaders spread threats with practiced ease. They had discovered that violence and intimidation were more effective than treaties or negotiations. Bit by bit, the council bent to their will. Those who resisted found themselves targeted. Ambassadors went missing, colonies vanished, and whole fleets were reduced to wreckage. The message was clear: obey or be destroyed. For many species, survival meant silence. Representatives who once spoke boldly now whispered among themselves. The Thalori, the gentle Jera, and the proud Keltans all had lost their courage. Each feared being singled out by the Dominion. Still, even under this shadow, hope never completely died. Rumors spread in the hidden corners of the galaxy. Old stories told of a species that had stood against warlords and tyrants, a species that refused to break even when pushed to the edge of extinction. These stories spoke of humans. Humans were once part of the council. Records said they had lived on Earth, a blue planet rich with life, and from there had spread to the stars. They were ambitious, reckless, but also strong in spirit. They had fought wars among themselves, but when threatened by outsiders, they had united. The archives told of their victories, outnumbered, outgunned, yet always finding a way to win. But then they had vanished. No one knew exactly why. Some said they had destroyed themselves. Others believed they had left the galaxy behind. The truth was buried beneath layers of myth. In quiet gatherings, small species still whispered of them. They spoke of a time when humans had promised to return. They spoke of cryo chambers, machines that could preserve life for centuries. It was said that whole groups of humans had chosen sleep, waiting for the day they would be needed again. For many, these were only tales told to children. Yet in the darkest hours, when the Dominion tightened its grip, people clung to these whispers like a lifeline. On the floor of the council, debates had become nothing more than performances. The Veyran would enter, their armor shining, and lesser species would shrink into silence. One day, Ambassador Selric of the Thalori, a thin being with silver skin and mournful eyes, dared to raise his voice. He spoke of the Dominion's cruelty, of colonies enslaved and fleets destroyed. He begged the council to stand together, to remember the values they were built on. His words trembled, but his heart was strong. For a brief moment, others listened. For a brief moment, it seemed as if courage might return. But then the Veyran leader rose. His name was Carvos, a towering figure with eyes like burning coals. He laughed as Selric spoke, mocking him in front of the chamber. His soldiers stomped their boots, drowning out Selric's words. And then came the threat. If the Thalori continued to complain, their homeworld would burn. Silence fell. No one moved to defend Selric. The council lowered their eyes one by one. Selric left the chamber alone, his people abandoned by those who should have been allies. This was how things were now. The Dominion terrorized and the council obeyed. But even as the halls filled with fear, in the darkest and most forgotten parts of the galaxy, a secret slept. Far away, around a dying star, drifted a station long forgotten. It was broken and scarred, its outer hull pitted from centuries of neglect. No signals came from it, no traffic approached it. The maps had marked it as abandoned. Inside, dust coated the walls and silence ruled. Yet hidden deep within its core lay hundreds of cryo chambers. They stood in long rows, humming softly, their lights still glowing after all this time. And inside those chambers, humans slept. They had gone into slumber by choice. At a time when their people faced both greatness and ruin, leaders had made a decision. To protect humanity's future, a group would sleep until the galaxy needed them. The machines would keep them alive, waiting for a day that no one could predict. That day was drawing near. No one on the council knew of the station. No one believed humans still lived. Yet fate has a way of moving pieces when they are most needed. A freighter carrying refugees would soon drift close to the dying star. Its crew, desperate and weary, would soon discover what had been hidden for centuries. But before that moment arrived, the galaxy remained in the grip of the Dominion. The Council continued to meet, though its purpose had been hollowed out. The smaller species argued in whispers, but no one dared to challenge the Dominion openly. Many had lost hope entirely, yet some still remembered the stories. In small circles and private places, words were spoken that carried weight. They said that humans were not gone forever. They said that one day the cryo chambers would open. And when that happened, the galaxy would change. Carvos and the Dominion did not fear the Council, but in the back of their minds the stories of humans lingered. Their archives also held records of wars past. Though much was erased, enough remained to remind them of a time when humans had stood toe-to-toe with empires and had not fallen. It was said that humans could adapt faster than any species, that they were unpredictable, and that they never gave up. These memories were old, but they were not forgotten. Carvos laughed at the Council's weakness, but when alone, he sometimes wondered if the whispers could be true. The galaxy was a place of fear, but also of waiting. Waiting for something unseen, something long promised. Waiting for the sleepers to wake. The Varen Dominion believed they had crushed all resistance. They believed the Council was theirs. But they did not know that deep within that forgotten station, humanity still lived. The cryo chambers still held them. And one day those chambers would open. The Council, broken and silent now, would witness something it had long forgotten. The galaxy would remember the name of humans. In the meantime, fear ruled. Every Council meeting ended with Varen threats. Every attempt at resistance was crushed before it began. But in the stars, beyond the reach of their power, destiny prepared its answer. The day would come soon when the Varen would face a truth they could not intimidate. A truth they could not erase. Humanity, silent and sleeping, was waiting. The galaxy was not as safe for the Dominion as they believed. The freighter was old and carried the scars of many journeys. Its engines groaned as it moved through the quiet stretch of space near a dying star. Inside, the crew worked with tired hands and weary hearts. They carried refugees, families who had lost their homes to the Varen Dominion. These people were silent, their faces lined with grief. They had seen their worlds burned, their loved ones taken. Now they floated through the void, unsure if safety even existed anymore. Among the crew was Clara Matthews. She was young but skilled, with sharp eyes and steady hands. She had grown up hearing stories about Earth, though she had never seen it herself. Her ancestors had been part of the human colonies that spread far before the great silence of Earth. She did not think much about those stories anymore. Life in space was harsh, and dreams had little place in it. She only thought about keeping the ship flying and helping those who had nowhere else to go. Beside her often worked Daniel Carter, a mechanic with a calm voice and a thoughtful mind. They trusted each other and worked as a team. The freighter drifted near the broken station by accident. Their scanners showed strange readings, faint signals that should not have been there. Clara studied the data with interest. Daniel frowned, saying the place looked abandoned. But Clara felt a pull, a quiet instinct that told her they had found something important. With the captain's approval, they brought the freighter closer. The station looked dead from the outside. Its walls were cracked and pieces of metal floated around it. No lights shone from the surface. The refugees whispered in fear, begging the crew not to dock. They believed it was cursed, another trap left by the Dominion. But Clara stood firm. Something inside called to her. The captain finally gave in, and the freighter locked onto one of the old docking ports. Clara and Daniel were the first to step inside. Their lights cut through the darkness, showing empty halls covered in dust. The air smelled stale but was still breathable. They walked slowly, their footsteps echoing through the silence. Everything seemed lifeless until Clara's scanner beeped. It showed power still flowing deep within the station. That should have been impossible after so many centuries. Excitement mixed with fear as they followed the faint trail of energy. At last they came to a sealed door. It was larger than the others, with markings half faded but still strange and strong. Clara ran her hands over the surface, feeling a connection she could not explain. With effort, Daniel managed to open the door. What lay beyond made them both stop in awe. The chamber stretched wide, filled with rows upon rows of cryo chambers. They glowed faintly, lights still blinking, machines still humming. Inside each chamber lay a figure, men and women, their faces calm, frozen in time. Clara felt her heart race. She knew without needing to be told. These were humans. For a long moment they just stood there. Daniel whispered that it was impossible, that no machine could last this long. But Clara shook her head. She remembered the stories of humans who had chosen to sleep, who had promised to return when the galaxy needed them. Her hands trembled as she stepped closer to one of the chambers. She wiped the frost from the glass and looked into the face of a man who could have been her neighbor. He looked alive, only sleeping. Clara turned to Daniel and said they had to tell the others. But Daniel hesitated. He feared what would happen if the Dominion learned of this. The Veyron would destroy the station at once. Clara knew he was right, yet she also knew they had a duty. These people had not slept for nothing. They had preserved themselves for a reason. They returned to the freighter and told the captain what they had found. At first he did not believe them. But when he saw the chambers with his own eyes, his face grew pale. He ordered secrecy, warning that if word spread, it would bring death upon them all. Still, Clara could not let go of what she had seen. She spent hours studying the machines, learning their patterns, searching for a way to wake even one of the sleepers. Daniel tried to stop her, but her determination was stronger than his fear. The refugees soon learned the truth. Some wept in fear, saying that waking the sleepers would bring ruin. Others felt hope for the first time in years. They whispered among themselves that perhaps this was the answer, that perhaps the legends were real. Clara listened to them, her heart torn between caution and courage. Finally, Clara made her choice. She returned to the chamber and stood before the control panel. Her hands shook as she entered the sequence. The machines groaned, lights flickered, and steam hissed from the chamber. Daniel stood by her side, his face tight with worry. One of the pods opened slowly, releasing a cloud of cold mist. The figure inside stirred. A man stepped forward, tall and broad, with eyes that opened in confusion but sharpened with focus. He stumbled at first, then steadied himself. Clara rushed to help him. His voice was rough, but his words were clear. He asked where he was and what had happened. Clara told him the truth, that he had been asleep for centuries and the galaxy had changed. He listened in silence, his expression darkening as she spoke of the Dominion and the fall of the Council. Others began to stir as the machines continued their cycle. A woman with keen eyes and strong posture emerged, introducing herself as Dr. Laura Bennett. Another man, lean and sharp, was Eric Hughes, a strategist and thinker. One by one, more chambers opened and more humans returned to life. They were weak at first, but their minds were sharp, and their spirits grew stronger with each passing moment. The freighter crew watched in silence as the humans gathered. They spoke quietly among themselves, trying to understand how so much time had passed. Clara explained as best she could, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Daniel stood near her, watching the awakening with a mix of awe and fear. He knew the galaxy would never be the same again. Aaron Mitchell, the first man awakened, listened carefully to Clara's story. When she finished, he stood tall and said something that sent chills through the room. He said that if humanity had been preserved, it was because the galaxy would one day need them again. He looked at the others and saw the same fire in their eyes. The world they had known was gone, but their duty was not. Dr. Bennett examined the machines and declared that their technology could be adapted, that humanity could catch up with the galaxy quickly. Eric Hughes began sketching ideas for defense, remembering that humans had never won wars by strength alone, but by strategy and will. Clara felt both fear and pride as she listened. These were not just survivors. They were leaders. Outside, the freighter floated in silence, unaware that across the stars whispers were beginning to spread. The Council had heard rumors, though few believed them. But the Dominion had also heard. Their spies reported strange signals near the dying star. Carvos, the Veyron leader, felt a chill when he heard the words spoken by trembling voices. Humans. The galaxy did not yet know, but the balance of power had already begun to shift. The sleepers were awake. Humanity was returning, and nothing would ever be the same again. The chamber was alive with movement now. The cryopods that had been silent for centuries were opening one by one, releasing mist and revealing faces that had slept through time itself. Clara stood close, her heart pounding as she watched. Daniel remained beside her, still uneasy but unable to look away. What had begun as a simple discovery had now turned into something much greater. The humans were returning. Aaron Mitchell steadied himself as more memories came back to him. He had been a captain once, a soldier who had fought wars on behalf of humanity. Now he found himself in a galaxy ruled by fear. He clenched his fists, anger burning in his chest at the stories Clara had told him. When he looked around at his fellow humans, he saw the same fire in their eyes. They had not chosen to survive just to bow to tyrants. If the galaxy had fallen into darkness, then their awakening had a purpose. Dr. Laura Bennett moved quickly among the pods, checking the people as they woke. Her training as a doctor returned as if no time had passed. She calmed those who were frightened, reassured those who were weak, and explained to them the strange situation they faced. She was calm but firm, her words giving strength. Eric Hughes stood quietly nearby, observing, already calculating. He spoke little, but his sharp eyes missed nothing. He studied the freighter crew, the state of the station, and the whispered fear in the voices of the refugees. He was already thinking of the battles to come. Clara felt small in their presence, but Aaron noticed her courage. He asked her to explain everything again, and she did. She told of the Dominion, of the Council's silence, of how species had been enslaved or destroyed. Her words carried weight, not because she spoke with power, but because she spoke with honesty. When she finished, Aaron placed a hand on her shoulder. He thanked her for waking them. For a moment, Clara felt the burden lift. She had done the right thing. The humans began to gather in groups, speaking quietly, sharing their shock at the new world. They asked about Earth, and Clara admitted she did not know what had become of it. Her ancestors had left long ago, and no word had come since. A silence fell among them then, heavy with grief. But Aaron broke it with firm words. He said humanity's heart was not bound to one planet. Wherever they stood together, there was Earth. His voice rang with certainty, and it rekindled their spirits. Daniel helped provide tools and supplies from the freighter. He showed the humans what had changed in technology since they had slept. They learned quickly, adapting with ease. Dr. Bennett was fascinated by the medical advances while Aaron studied weapons and ships. Eric listened to the chatter of the refugees and began to build a picture of the galaxy's politics. He whispered to Aaron that fear was the Dominion's greatest weapon, and that humanity's first step should be to break that fear. As more humans awoke, the freighter crew struggled to keep up with food and resources. The refugees, once filled with despair, now carried hope. They watched the humans with awe, whispering among themselves. Some prayed, others cried, but all felt a stirring in their hearts. Clara noticed it too. Something had changed. The silence of fear was being replaced with whispers of courage. But across the stars, the Veyron Dominion had already noticed something was wrong. Their patrols had detected strange signals near the dying star. Carvos, the leader of the Dominion, received the report with narrowed eyes. He remembered the old records, the tales of humans. Though he mocked them in public, deep inside he remembered that humans had been dangerous. They had been unpredictable. He ordered a strike force to investigate, his voice cold as he promised that if humans had truly returned, they would be destroyed before they could rise. Back on the station, Aaron and Eric planned. They knew the Dominion would come. They could not remain hidden for long. Aaron suggested strengthening the station's defenses, while Eric insisted they also needed to prepare escape routes. Dr. Bennett agreed, reminding them that survival was just as important as defiance. Clara listened, feeling the weight of what was to come. She had awakened something powerful, but now they were all in danger. Daniel worked tirelessly with the humans, showing them how to adapt the freighter's systems. They scavenged parts from the station, repairing weapons that had been silent for centuries. The humans impressed everyone with their ability to learn, to turn scraps into tools to make the broken whole again. Clara watched them work and felt pride swell in her chest. They were not just survivors. They were builders, fighters, leaders. The days passed quickly as the station came alive again. Lights glowed brighter, corridors filled with voices, and the once dead place became a fortress of hope. The refugees helped as best they could, inspired by the humans' determination. Some offered food, others carried supplies, and even the children found ways to help. For the first time in years, they felt like they belonged to something greater than fear. Aaron stood before the gathered humans and refugees one evening. His voice carried through the chamber as he spoke of their duty. He said they had been preserved not to hide, but to act. He said humanity had always been called to face the impossible, and this was no different. His words stirred hearts, and even the weary found new strength. Clara felt tears in her eyes as she listened. She realized that humanity was not just returning. They were already leading, but shadows grew on the horizon. The Dominion strike force was on its way, warships cutting through the void. Carvos himself watched from his flagship. eager to crush the whispers before they spread. He imagined the terror that would follow when the Council learned humanity had awakened only to be destroyed. Fear would strengthen the Dominion's grip, but he underestimated what he would face. The humans prepared. Eric laid out strategies that surprised even the freighter crew. He used the station's weaknesses as traps, turning broken corridors into ambush points. He instructed refugees on how to create distractions, how to fight even with little. Dr. Bennett organized the wounded and prepared medical stations. Aaron trained the strongest among them, drilling them with simple but effective tactics. Clara and Daniel worked beside them all, refusing to rest. They were no longer bystanders. They were part of something greater. In the stillness of space, the moment drew near. Clara stood at the viewing window, watching the stars. She thought of her ancestors, of the stories she had heard as a child. She had never believed she would live to see them come true. Yet here she was, standing among legends returned to life. Her heart was heavy with fear, but also with pride. No matter what came, she knew the galaxy would never be the same again. The cryo chambers stood empty now, their purpose fulfilled. Humanity was awake. They were weak in number but strong in spirit. The Dominion was coming, and soon the first true test would arrive. Aaron looked out over his people and the refugees who now followed them. He spoke quietly but with conviction. He said that no matter what happened, they would not bow. The galaxy had forgotten humanity, but it would remember soon enough. As the first signals of the approaching Veyron fleet appeared on their sensors, silence fell across the station. Every heart pounded with dread but also with hope. Humanity had returned and their fight was about to begin. The station floated in the darkness of space, no longer silent but filled with life and voices. Humans who had slept for centuries now moved with purpose, preparing for the danger that approached. Refugees once broken and silent carried supplies and worked beside them. For the first time in generations, hope had returned to their hearts. But the quiet between the stars did not last. The Dominion's fleet was coming. The warning came from Daniel, who had been monitoring the scanners. His voice was tense as he called out the readings. A formation of Veyron ships was approaching fast. Their engines burned bright and their weapons were armed. Clara felt her heart sink as she stared at the screen. There were too many ships for the station to withstand. But Aaron Mitchell did not falter. He looked at the display, then at his people, and said simply that this was the moment they had been preserved for. Eric Hughes gathered the leaders in the command chamber. His tone was calm but sharp. He explained that numbers did not matter as much as strategy. The Dominion expected fear and surrender, but they would face resistance instead. He pointed out weak spots in the station's structure, areas that could be turned into traps. He explained how to use the Dominion's arrogance against them. Aaron listened carefully, nodding in agreement. Dr. Bennett prepared her medical teams, setting up makeshift stations for the wounded. She moved with speed, her eyes steady, knowing that many lives would depend on her. The humans and refugees worked side by side. They welded broken panels into shields, rigged old systems into weapons, and set explosives in hidden corners. Children carried water and messages, their faces determined despite the fear in their eyes. Clara and Daniel moved constantly, helping wherever they were needed. Clara's hands shook as she tightened bolts and wired circuits, but she forced herself to keep going. She had started this, and she would not stop now. When the Veyron fleet came into view, silence fell across the station. Through the viewing ports, the enemy ships looked massive, their hulls glowing with energy. Refugees whispered prayers while humans clenched their fists and stood firm. Aaron spoke to them, his voice carrying across the chamber. He reminded them that fear was the Dominion's greatest weapon, but it would not win here. He told them they were not just fighting for themselves, but for every voice the Council had silenced. His words steadied their hearts. The first wave began with blinding light. Veyron cannons struck the station, shaking its walls and filling the corridors with echoes of thunder. Panels cracked, sparks flew, but the station held. Eric gave the order and hidden weapons fired back. Old turrets spat streams of energy, catching the Veyron ships off guard. Explosions lit up the void as 2 enemy fighters fell, destroyed before they could react. The station erupted in cheers, a sound that spread like fire. But the battle was far from over. More Veyron ships moved in, their weapons tearing through the outer layers of the station. Hull breaches opened, sucking air and debris into space. Refugees scrambled to seal the gaps while humans held the lines. Aaron led a team of fighters into the corridors where Veyran soldiers forced their way inside. The clash was fierce. The Veyran were taller and stronger, but the humans fought with a spirit that could not be measured. They used traps, ambushes, and sheer determination to push them back. Clara found herself in the middle of the chaos. She had never held a weapon before, but now she gripped a rifle with shaking hands. Daniel stood beside her, calm but focused. They guarded one of the medical stations, protecting Dr. Bennett as she worked. Wounded humans and refugees were carried in, blood staining their clothes, but Laura's hands moved quickly, saving lives with every passing moment. Her voice was calm, reminding everyone that they were not alone. Eric directed fighters through comms, his voice steady even as explosions shook the station. He ordered retreats where needed, counterattacks where the enemy was weakest. His strategies confused the Veyran, who had expected easy victory. Instead of surrender, they faced resistance at every turn. They pushed deeper into the station, but every corridor became a battlefield. Every step forward cost them dearly. Aaron led from the front. His rifle blazed as he charged through smoke-filled corridors, his voice rising above the noise. He fought not just with strength, but with purpose. Those who followed him found courage they never knew they had. Refugees who had once trembled in fear now swung pipes and tools, standing beside the humans against the invaders. The station shook with battle, but its spirit did not break. Outside, the fight in space raged as well. The freighter, armed with makeshift weapons, darted among the larger ships, drawing fire and striking when it could. Its crew fought with desperation, knowing that if they fell, so would everyone inside the station. The Dominion's fleet grew frustrated, their leader roaring commands as losses mounted. Carvos himself watched from his flagship, fury burning in his eyes. This was not the easy victory he had promised. This was something else, something he had feared. Hours passed, though it felt like days. Smoke filled the station and cries of pain echoed through the halls. Yet still the defenders stood. Dr. Bennett worked until her hands bled, refusing to stop. Eric never left his post, his mind racing with calculations. Daniel fought with quiet strength, never leaving Clara's side. And Clara, though terrified, refused to run. She fired her weapon, stood her ground, and found courage in the faces around her. These were no longer whispers of legend. These were humans alive and fighting. At last, a turning point came. Eric had set charges in the lower decks, waiting for the right moment. When the Veyran pushed too far, he gave the signal. Explosions ripped through the corridors, cutting off their forces and trapping them in chaos. Aaron led the counterattack, driving the enemy back with relentless fury. The defenders surged forward, their voices echoing with one cry. They would not bow. The Dominion fleet, battered and bleeding, pulled back at last. Carvos raged on his flagship, smashing his fists against the console. He had wanted to crush the humans quickly, to erase their return before the Council learned the truth. Instead, his fleet limped away, humiliated. His threats carried less weight now, for the galaxy had seen what had happened. Humanity had stood against the Dominion and survived. When the battle ended, silence returned to the station. Smoke drifted through broken corridors and the wounded lay in rows. But among the pain there was also triumph. They had faced the Dominion's wrath and endured. Refugees wept, holding one another. Humans stood tall, their eyes bright with fire. Clara leaned against a wall, her hands shaking, tears on her cheeks. Daniel touched her shoulder, his voice soft as he told her she had done well. Aaron walked through the station, speaking to his people, lifting their spirits. He told them this was only the beginning, that the Dominion would return, but now the galaxy knew the truth. Humanity was awake. Dr. Bennett stood by his side, her clothes stained with blood, her face weary but strong. Eric joined them, his mind already planning the next steps. They knew the road ahead would be hard, but they were ready. In the quiet that followed, Clara looked out at the stars. She thought of how the galaxy had once whispered of humans as myths, as legends long gone. Now those whispers had become real. The Council would soon hear. The Dominion would tremble. The galaxy would remember that humans did not surrender, that even after centuries of silence, they would rise again. The battle for survival had been won, but a greater war was coming. Humanity was no longer asleep. They were awake, and they had shown the galaxy what that meant. The station was damaged but still alive. Its walls bore the scars of the battle. Smoke still lingered in the air, and many of its people were wounded. Yet for all the pain, there was victory. The Dominion fleet had been forced to retreat. For the first time in centuries, the Veyron had faced resistance and failed to crush it. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy had seen hope. Humanity had awakened, and the news was spreading. Aaron Mitchell stood at the center of the station's main chamber, speaking quietly to the survivors. His voice was firm but carried warmth. He told them that what they had done was more than survival. They had shown the galaxy that the Dominion could be resisted, that fear was not unbreakable. He reminded them that their fight was only beginning. The Dominion would come again and stronger, but now others would know they were not invincible. His words steadied their hearts. Clara sat on the edge of a broken crate, her rifle across her lap. Her hands were sore, her body bruised, but her spirit was burning. She had never imagined herself in a battle, never thought she would see legends rise before her eyes. She looked around at the people, the humans she had awakened, the refugees who had stood their ground, and felt a sense of belonging she had never known. Daniel sat beside her, quiet as always, but there was pride in his eyes. He told her that she had given the galaxy a chance it had almost lost. Dr. Laura Bennett moved among the wounded, her hands steady even though she was exhausted. She had worked without pause, saving as many lives as she could. Her clothes were torn and blood-stained, but her spirit was strong. People looked at her with gratitude, whispering her name with respect. She brushed it aside, saying only that she had done her duty. But inside she felt the same fire that burned in Aaron and Eric. Humanity had not returned to fade into the shadows. They had returned to stand. Eric Hughes sat with a small group of leaders, his mind already turning toward the future. He spread out a rough map of the galaxy, marking systems controlled by the Dominion and those still holding some freedom. He explained that the Dominion's strength came not only from their ships but from the fear they inspired. He said that now that fear was cracked. If they could spread the story of what had happened here, if they could show the galaxy that the Dominion could bleed, then the balance would begin to shift. His voice was calm, but his eyes burned with quiet determination. The refugees, once scattered and broken, now gathered in groups, speaking with excitement and wonder. They told each other what they had seen, what they had felt. They spoke of humans who had stepped from the past and fought like warriors of legend. Their voices carried through the station, and already whispers were spreading beyond it. Merchant ships, smugglers, and even council spies would carry the news. The Dominion had tried to bury humanity, but now the galaxy would know they had risen again. The council itself sat far away, still wrapped in silence and fear. When news reached them, some dismissed it as rumor, but others remembered the old stories. Ambassadors whispered in secret halls, wondering if the balance of power had finally shifted. The weaker species, long crushed under the Dominion's boot, began to speak of rebellion. For the first time in centuries, there was something stronger than fear. There was hope. On his flagship, Carvo seethed. His pride had been shattered. He had promised the Council and his people that he would erase the humans quickly, that they were nothing but myths unworthy of fear. Instead, he had been forced to retreat. He stared out at the stars with rage, vowing that he would return with greater force, that he would erase humanity completely this time. Yet in the back of his mind, he felt something colder than anger. He felt fear, a fear he would never admit aloud. For he remembered what the old records had said. Humans did not stop. Back on the station, Aaron gathered his people. He spoke not as a commander from the past, but as a leader of the present. He told them that their survival meant responsibility. They could not hide. The galaxy had seen them, and now they had to act. He declared that humanity would take its place again, not as conquerors, but as defenders of freedom. He raised his voice and said that no empire, no matter how cruel, could silence them again. His words echoed through the chamber, and the people answered with cheers that shook the walls. Clara listened, her heart swelling. She thought of the moment she had touched the cryo chamber, the decision she had made to wake them. She realized now that it had changed everything. She had not just awakened people, she had awakened hope. Daniel told her she had done more than she knew. She smiled through her exhaustion, knowing that her choice had been worth everything. Dr. Bennett stepped forward after Aaron spoke, adding her own words. She said that survival meant caring for one another, that humanity's strength was not only in battle but in compassion. She reminded them that they were fighting not just for themselves but for every species crushed under the Dominion's rule. Her voice was softer than Aaron's, but it carried just as much power. People listened, their eyes shining with respect. Eric followed, laying out the first steps. He explained that they needed allies. They could not face the Dominion alone. He spoke of reaching out to species who still remembered humanity, of spreading word of their return. He spoke of turning the Council's silence into action, of forcing them to stand. He knew it would be hard, but he believed it could be done. His calm certainty gave people confidence. Together, they formed the beginning of a plan. The station would be repaired, made into a stronghold. The freighter would serve as their messenger, carrying word to distant systems. Humans and refugees alike would train, preparing for the battles ahead. It was a small beginning, but it was real, and from this spark a fire would spread. That night, Clara stood at the viewing window staring at the stars. She imagined the whispers already racing through the galaxy, reaching ears that had long given up hope. She thought of the council chambers, silent and afraid, soon to be shaken by the sound of humanity's return. She thought of the Dominion, proud and cruel, now forced to face what they had tried to forget. She whispered to herself that the galaxy would never be the same. Aaron joined her, standing in silence for a while before speaking. He said that when he first woke, he had not known what to expect. But now he knew why they had been preserved. Humanity had always been at its strongest when the odds were against them. He told Clara that she had given them a chance to prove it again. Clara felt tears in her eyes as she nodded. She was just an engineer on a freighter, yet she had become part of something greater than she had ever dreamed. The station drifted among the stars, wounded but unbroken. Its halls, once silent, now echoed with voices of hope and determination. The Dominion would return. The battles ahead would be fierce, but the galaxy had seen the truth. Humans had awakened from their long sleep. They had fought. They had survived, and they had shown that they would not bow. The Council would tremble. The Dominion would rage. But the future had already changed. Humanity was no longer a whisper of the past. They were alive, awake, and ready, and the galaxy would never forget the day they walked out of the cryo chambers and faced the darkness with fire in their hearts.